Okay, all right, here we go. Welcome to Commsverse, everyone. This session is called Leveraging Cloud Video Interop to Accelerate Teams Adoption and Maximize Your Hardware ROI. Today will be presented by Paul Sholey. Hopefully I've got your name right there, Paul. Over to you.
Close enough. Thank you for that, Paul Scoley. But it's okay, it catches most people out, so no problem at all. So welcome everyone. Delighted that you could find a bit of time to join me in the short session this morning. As Lee pointed out, my name is Paul Scoley. I'm from Blue Jeans. As the more observant of you may have noticed, Blue Jeans by Verizon, in that we were acquired by Verizon a couple of months ago, so we are now part of Verizon. So absolutely. So what I wanted to cover today is Cloud Video Interop. This is the agenda. So it's first off, and look, I appreciate there are some real Teams experts on this call, but typically when we are speaking to some of our customers, what do we see as the typical anatomy, if you like, the typical cycle, of a Teams deployment? And what are some of the key issues to address at various stages throughout that Teams deployment? And how to look at moving from chat to messaging to file sharing to video. And that brings into it this Cloud Video Interop problem, which is all about making sure that Teams will work in conjunction with hardware you may already have invested in the meeting room. And I mean there are things like Cisco meeting room endpoints, Poly meeting room endpoints, Lifesize, Starleaf, and all those types of things. So that's really what I want to touch on, and hopefully this is something that you are thinking about if you are in one of these phases of a Teams deployment. And I think it's particularly relevant when we look at reopening up the offices in the coming weeks and the coming months. As I'm sure you know, not only has Teams been a massive success story for Microsoft, but it's probably been accelerated over the last few months. I mean, these are just some of the stats, and they are a little bit a few weeks out of date now in terms of the number of people that are using Teams. 75 million a day, and I'm sure some of the other presenters have maybe talked about some of these statistics. Meeting participants in a single day is over 200 million, and Teams meetings generated over 4 billion. And one of the things that we've seen over the last few weeks and last couple of months is that this adoption of Teams, which was, according to Microsoft, their fastest and most quickly ever adopted product, it has been accelerated with the working from home movements, in that we've all had to implement business continuity planning over the last few weeks. It's involved all of our offices shutting, it's involved all of our people working from home, and we've enabled that by and large with video conferencing capability, and others, of course, but video conferencing capability, whether or not that's Teams, others such as the traditional Blue Jeans product set, or or Zoom or whatever it might be. But this momentum behind Teams has accelerated as part of the COVID pandemic. But now that, touch wood, we're coming towards the end of that, how do we re-enable Teams in the offices? We're still going to have large numbers of people working from home, but also people coming into the offices, and people still want to be using Teams, still want to be joining a Teams video call, potentially from the traditional meeting room environments that we've all been used to using for many years. And that's really what I want to touch on. How do we get all that to work? How do we accelerate that? So Teams is going like crazy, I think, and most people that we talk to tend to take a phased approach to Teams deployments. It's not something that you just switch on and you enable the whole organization with. Phase one is typically chat, it's messaging, it's file sharing, it's clearly something we all want to adopt. We've probably all got it as part of our Microsoft Office licensing. So let's immediately start supporting the business with chat, messaging, file sharing, and with the latest and greatest technology to do so, which is clearly Teams. At the end of phase one, once it's perhaps widely adopted across the business for chat and messaging, typically then organizations introduce it in stages when it comes to capability. It's introducing Teams In desktop and mobile, it's introducing Teams in the room system. So are we going to use Teams rooms? What are we going to do with our existing hardware in the meeting rooms? It's introducing Teams calling. Typically, we see that as phase 2. And then phase 3 can be, the more broader scale adoption of Teams, complete workflow and app integration, more complex reporting and troubleshooting, which of course you need to support an enterprise deployment of anything like this. So this is typically what we see when we talk to customers, the anatomy of a Teams deployment. I'm sure this has been changed a little bit over the last coming weeks, where we've probably had to go from phase 1 to phase 3 very, very quickly in an accelerated way. But of course, so the last couple of months without people being in the office, we might have skipped over the Teams in room systems, for example. So this is the anatomy that we see very much so over Teams deployments. Most people have got to phase 1, most definitely, and phase 2. This is really what I want to focus on here. This bit, we're introducing Teams into the conference room world, right? And how do we go about doing that in the most cost-effective way? A lot of our customers are suffering from this dilemma, and I'm talking about some major organizations that we've worked with at BlueJeans, and we've had the pleasure of supporting them on their Teams journey. A lot of these organizations come to us because they want to go with Teams, they want to leverage Teams, they want to use Teams, of course, for video conferencing capabilities that it has, but they have already invested significantly in existing hardware in the conference room, right? And this is going to be standard spaced hardware. It's going to be H323 or SIP-based meeting room environments, and they might have invested significant sums of money, 7 figures, $1 million plus for some of our larger organizations and larger customers in the hardware to support the meeting room environment. And like I touched on before, that is typically, it's Cisco hardware, it's Poly hardware, it's Lifesize hardware, it's all these types of things. Now, the problem they come to us with is they've invested all of this money, they've got it deployed, all of the users are used to walking into the conference rooms, and they've got the hardware that they're familiar with. But it doesn't work with Teams. It doesn't work with Teams. So then they've got a couple of things to do. Are they going to replace all of that hardware, with something that supports Teams natively? So literally rip and replace all of the, the hardware, which might only be a year or 2 old, the Cisco hardware or whatever, rip and replace it and ask for, funding, and go through a procurement exercise, and do a wholesale rip and replace of a lot of the legacy hardware in the meeting rooms that doesn't support Teams natively. Are they going to contemplate doing that? And that's an option. Of course, it's an option to go and get Teams enabled hardware. But if you're going to do that, most of our customers are telling us that it's important that hardware doesn't just support Teams. It also can support Zoom, for example. It can also support BlueJeans calls. It can also support Cisco calls and many, many, many different types of technologies. So we want to have an open hardware environment that doesn't necessarily tie us just to Teams, because Teams might be, of course, the preferred way of doing video conferencing, the preferred solution for doing internal calls. And that would be fine if the world just existed internally. But some of our customers, some of our partners, some of our suppliers might be wanting to invite us to a Cisco call, to a BlueJeans call, to a Zoom call, and we don't necessarily want to be bound solely to any one solution. We don't want to be bound solely to Teams or bound solely to Cisco or bound solely to Zoom or BlueJeans or whatever. So a lot of the customers are coming to us and saying, what, we don't necessarily want to rip and replace all of our existing hardware because of the cost implications. And we also don't want to tie ourselves just to, one video conferencing platform and one video conferencing environment. We want to have the flexibility to be able to use whatever it is that we want. So that's a problem necessarily initially when we talk about deploying Teams. And if the answer to that is yes, right? The answer to all of the questions is yes. Yes, meaning that we do have existing hardware, right? And we would like to enable that existing hardware with Teams, and we do want to have an open hardware environment. Then what we need to do is look at another piece of technology called the Cloud Video Interop, or CVI as it is. So what is CVI then? So the Cloud Video Interop program, first of all, you've got to be invited as a supplier to join that Cloud Video Interop program by Microsoft. Right now, there are only 4 suppliers that are certified and work with Microsoft to provide Cloud Video Interop. As it's a Microsoft qualified third-party solution that enables third-party meeting rooms to join Microsoft Teams. Right, so it's very simple, very, very simple. You know, if you have got Cisco, Poly, Lifesize, whatever it might be, standard-based hardware in your meeting rooms that doesn't support Teams natively, we're going to say to you, you don't need to rip and replace all of that hardware. You know, you can use a CVI piece of technology that will enable those meeting rooms to join Teams calls, you know, without having to replace the hardware. So we can use open standards. We can optimize existing in those standards-based endpoints, those SIP or those H23 endpoints, but we can also accelerate the Teams adoption, right? You know, by reducing meeting friction for the end user. So I'm talking about here about when we go into those meeting rooms environments and I want to join a Teams call. Yeah, I just walk in and I touch a button, right? Nothing complicated. There's no extra level of complexity that the end user needs to face. They can literally walk into those. You know, we've got some hardware that's 2, 3, 4 years old, whatever it might be. One touch to join, bosh, and I'm in a Teams call. But also as well, it's all about being able to do this at pace. It's about being able to do it quickly. Accelerate the Teams deployment without having to ask for extra funding, without having to roll out new technology, new standards, but also do it with the benefits of a cloud service. So we don't want to bring in an extra level of complexity into the data center. We don't want to be worrying about VM images, you know, virtual machines or anything like this. We really want to be able to leverage the modern way of working, which is just everything is cloud based. So this is what CVI is, Cloud Video Interop. Like I said, it's super simple. You know, if you've got legacy hardware you want to enable with Teams, then CVI will enable you to do that in the meeting room environment. Some of the things you need to be contemplating clearly when you go down this was how easy will it be to configure and deploy? Does it support one touch to join? So like I touched on before, you know, when the end user walks into a meeting room, is it a complex environment? Is it a complex string they need to answer? Do they need to do anything login? Or, you know, will it sync up with your systems that you already use in place to book meeting rooms and just have it available with one touch to join? So I walk into a room and it says, Paul, you've got your one-to-one with your boss and it's one touch to join. Clearly, when it comes to cloud-based solutions, we expect to have, you know, centralized real-time analytics, the ability to troubleshoot and problem solve centrally, you know, and also what's it like to procure? Is it an easy solution? So some of the things with BlueJeans, for example, with our CVI product, which is called the BlueJeans Teams Gateway, the BlueJeans Gateway for Microsoft Teams, you know, first off, it is a pure SaaS world. It exists within Microsoft Azure and it exists nowhere else. You know, there's no hybrid model, there's no local deployment, there's no local management. It exists 100% within our Microsoft Azure. So when you come to BlueJeans with for this problem, then there's no extra costs you need to consider. There's no Azure costs you might have for yourself. There's nothing on premise. There's no virtual machines to manage. We take all that away from you with a pure SaaS model. It's in our Azure instance, and there's no further costs. There's no hidden costs, and of course it means it's really quick to deploy. And some of our customers that we talk to are staggered by this, but we've got customers that have got thousands of meeting rooms across the world, right? Thousands of meeting rooms. And for us to enable those meeting rooms to join a Teams call is actually 6 commands, right? It's just 6 commands, pure SaaS model, 6 commands, and all of those meeting rooms are enabled. And they are all enabled for one touch as well. So, you know, pure SaaS. We deal with, you know, of course, the SaaS model we deal with availability at 99.99. You know, we deal with elasticity and we deal with failover and all that type of stuff. There are other solutions out there that take a more of a hybrid approach. And some of the solutions out there, like I said, there are only 4. they're tied more closely to one particular vendor of hardware. So it might be that there's one's tied, provided by a Cisco or someone like Poly that works wonderfully well if all of your meeting hardware is Poly or all of your meeting hardware is Cisco. But if you have a hybrid world where you have some Poly, some Cisco, some Lifesize, some Dolby, whatever it might be, a lot of those deployments need some element of on-premise, right, or some element of a hybrid solution where it might be hosted for you, but there's an extra level of complexity there when it comes to management and extra level of costs associated with it. The other thing that I think is vital when you're thinking about enabling the meeting room, is how easy is it to join? I've literally just got off the call with one of our major customers who is a hospital actually, and they're one of the leading hospitals, that are clearly fighting COVID right now. And they talked to me at length about how much they're doing virtually these days when it comes to case conferences and when it comes to getting all of the clinicians, together to just talk about cases and talk about multiple cases, and by using BlueJeans, by using this technology, one touch to join, particularly, they're talking about 30 cases per hour via video conferencing technology, and if you're going to do that, you're having clinicians, you're having nurses, you're having midwives, you're having psychologists all wanting to get together to talk about a particular case or a particular collection of cases, which it might be in the world of COVID. Not a lot of these people are technical. These people are not technical professionals. If you're a nurse or you're a midwife, you do not want to, you've got far more important things to do than figure out how to join a meeting. Right, it should be super simple. No matter what the technology, I've been walking from one meeting room to do the call at 8 o'clock. I'm now in a different meeting room with a call at 11 o'clock. It might be different hardware, it might be different setup, but it should still be one click to join, and you're in that conference, and you can get on, in this example, to talk about how to fix patients as opposed to trying to troubleshoot join flows. Of course, when it comes to cloud-based solutions, we do expect automatic updates. We expect 99.9 availability. We expect zero downtime, and we expect analytics and security built into the solution. Right, we expect analytics and security built into the solution. We've seen a lot during COVID, whereby people working from home and people not working in the office, clearly, sometimes security gets forgotten about in those worlds. Sometimes it feels less important if you're working from home and joining a call with some of your colleagues who are in a meeting room. Sometimes it feels less important somehow because you're in your home environment security. So it's got to be built into the solution. And one of the things as well, of course, when you talk about CVI, it will be a different vendor you need to engage with. Hopefully it would be ourselves. We'd be very happily to do so. But if you are looking at working with a new CVI vendor, of course it's got to exist in the modern world. It's got to be flexible. Not only it's got to be cloud-based, one touch to join, really easy to get up and running, and all those things I talked about. But you also got to have a flexible commercial model with your supplier. Whether or not you want to do that just for a few named hosts, whether or not you want some type of concurrency licensing model, you want to license the rooms, or you just want to license everyone in the organization. It is pretty important that you have that flexible commercial approach, and we'd be delighted to talk to you about that as well. So this is the BlueJeans gateway, which I've been talking to. We call it the BlueJeans the BlueJeans gateway for Microsoft Teams. I think I've touched on these things now. We do feel, and this has been borne out by many field trials by our customers. If I can be very bold and state that when we've been involved in a competitive evaluation by by our customers, we've never lost a single one of those. You would expect lots of people looking at CVI, they would look at all the alternatives on the market. There were only another 3, there were 4 in total. When people do a competitive analysis of BlueJeans versus the competition, we have never lost one of those. And it's for these reasons. It's the SaaS model, it's all inclusive, it's up and running literally in minutes, with 6 commands, 6 shell commands. That's all it is. You know, the manageability is cloud-based, it's in our Azure, simple to scale up, simple to manage, no hidden costs. You know, 99.99% availability. It is never going to go down virtually. And I've laboured quite long and hard. I think the native one touch to join, you know, making it easy to use and easy to join in simple join flow, so people have no issues getting into a Teams call. And just wanted to close by bringing it home a little bit, if I may, with a couple of customers. You know, this is one of the, if I was asked you all to name 3 oil companies, and you would all name as one of your 3 this company. Still going through the process of them letting us use their logo, you know, but they had a global deployment, 900 poly rooms globally, and some of them clearly in some far-flung parts of the world where they have offices associated with, you know, where they're drilling for oil. And that's quite a task for them to enable all of those rooms. You know, been working with this company for 18 months or so, and now they were one of the early adopters of this gateway, and one of the early adopters of enabling their Teams rooms in this way, and huge cost savings that they talked about around you know, around doing so, because it meant that they didn't have to upgrade any of their poly environment. They simply re-enabled those to support Microsoft Teams with the BlueJeans gateway for Microsoft Teams. You know, and one of the things that was important for them, because they are such a global organization, they literally do business on virtually every country in the planet, was the command center, which is our centralized console for identifying problems, for reporting on problems, for proactively fixing problems with the service, probably before the users have even noticed that there is an issue to be fixed. So a very centralized way of managing and deploying and troubleshooting globally across the world. So that was a huge oil company. Telit, you know, is another organization that we're very, very proud to work with, and there are many. They're a global technology service provider. You know, they want to enable Teams rooms on slightly less than, nothing quite at the size of the oil company that we just talked about. 46 poly and Lifesize rooms. You know, and they told us that they saved $1 million. They saved $1 million in that was what it would have cost them, you know, to go through all of the internal costs and all of the external costs, you know, and all of the project management costs and all of the business change and all of the training and the adoption to replace those meeting rooms. So they told us that we saved them over $1 million by the gateway to enable those poly and Lifesize rooms to work with Microsoft Teams. You know, and all based on the modern kind of the architecture that we talked about, the hybrid area. So not the hybrid, the Azure-based architecture. So if this is something you're looking at, if you are scratching your head when you get back home or get back to the office and trying to think through, how do I go about enabling my existing meeting room hardware with Microsoft Teams, which is very, very topical right now, because Teams has been more widely adopted during COVID. People are coming back to the office, not in the same numbers as they were before COVID, but we've now got a Teams enabled workforce. Some of our people are coming back to the office and they want to communicate with those people who are still working from home from the meeting room environment. And if you're trying to do that without writing large checks to upgrade all of your hardware, then I would encourage you to take a test drive, you know, download the gateway from our website, try it for free, or you can even buy a small deployment, a small scale adoption online. So I would encourage you just to get to our website, back up all the claims I've made about it being up and running within minutes with six simple commands. Give it a go. Very, very much look forward to seeing you do some of that, and would hopefully welcome the opportunity to support you myself should you need it. So that's as much as I wanted to go through. I've got plenty of time to take some questions. I'm not sure, Lee, if there are questions, or we can join the breakout room afterwards. Hey, Lee.
Hi, Paul. Sorry, my headset's been playing up, so I
That's
haven't been
okay.
able to speak to you. Do apologise. We actually have one question, which is what network firewall considerations need to be taken into account on-prem to connect to on-prem customer video services with BlueJeans software as a service cloud?
Say that again.
What network firewall considerations need to be taken into account on-prem to connect to on-prem customer video devices with BlueJeans cloud?
Okay, so first off, if we're talking about the world of Teams, there is we're not using the BlueJeans cloud. There would be nothing from the BlueJeans cloud, in the world of Teams. All we are doing, is our Teams gateway is, sits within Azure. So as long as you are, I guess, open up that connection to Azure, that would be the only thing that would need to be done. There's no further considerations.
Okay.
If the question is more towards the traditional BlueJeans service, because as BlueJeans we have this gateway type product, but if the question is more to do with the traditional BlueJeans meeting rooms environment, which is not really focused around, then we just need to give you, you just need to open up the port to, and we can give you the IP address to do so.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. So I think that's the only question we have. So we've got a breakout session that we can jump on to now. So I'll just post a link.
Okay, thank you.
For everyone to join, and we'll see you over there in a couple of minutes.
Wonderful. Okay, I'll jump onto that.
All right. Thanks, everyone.